It's time to put our cards on the table and see how our first negatives came out of the Perceptol. Alright, so I'm out here at the ranch again. Nice quiet spot. And so today what we're going to do is, this is the third part in our series. The first part we did is we mixed the Perceptol black and white, Ilford's developer. And the second one we just did the last video was when we went out and went to Turtle Creek Preserve and shot a negative. And now we're going to take a look and see what happened with this developer. So after I posted that video, I got a lot of interesting comments, emails and things like that. And some folks were concerned that because I had put the shadows in zone 5, that basically I was going to blow the top part of the negative. So yeah, so we'll see how this looks. You're going to see it here on the computer as well. Ironically, this is the way I've been shooting for the past year and a half, is I usually put meter for the very, very dark shadows, and then I usually have to pull my development at least 20 or 30%. Now with the PyroCat, I didn't have to worry about it so much because it would really stain the negative and hang on to those highlights. When I was using Ilford D76 and now the Perceptol, I have to make sure that, you know, if I'm keeping track of that, and I'm pulling my development if I need to. So let's just take a look here and see what we got. So let me go here and I'm going to jump into Elements. This is actually what I'm using for my scanning and everything. So I did scan the negatives as TIFFs. That's what I normally do. Now, to be totally fair, I did not, and I usually don't, in fact I don't ever bother with having the scanner put any kind of curves, levels adjustment, sharpening, and that stuff. So I like a nice raw scan, and I let Photoshop handle that. So alright, so here let's take a look. So this is, we shot 2 of the negatives. This is the first one. Now first thing we need to do is we got to get it right side up. So let me go ahead and just turn this around. And what I need to do is also, I'm just going to trim away the black edges. So hopefully I can do this somewhat halfway decent here. This bright light outside with the laptop doesn't seem to be working so great, but that's all right. We'll get it. There we go. So basically we just trimmed off our film holder edges. And now let's take a look at the histogram just to see what that looks like. Well, there's actually a little room here on the end, on the highlight end, and there's a little room over here on the shadow end. So okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now something I was thinking about during the while we're looking at this is, I had to wait for the clouds to go in and out. So I think partly what we're going to be seeing is cloud cover, because it was starting to cloud up that day. So anyway, we'll get there. All right, so generally what I will do first is set my white point and my black point. And how I do that is I just come over here and I press and hold Alt if you're on Windows, or that's going to be Option if you're on Mac. And I grab my white slider and I just start moving this over until I start seeing some whites show up a little bit. So you can see up there towards the top. So if I bring this back down a little bit, I don't obviously want to blow out any whites, but I do want it to be pretty white. And I'm going to do the same thing with the blacks, as I'm going to go ahead and just hold that Alt or Option key, and then I will move my blacks to the left until I start to see some black pixels show up. Oh, there it comes. So I'm just going to back that off a little bit. So basically there is our black, and our white point is now set. So here's before and here's after. So you does get a little contrast bump. So again, to be totally fair, I did not touch anything as far as the scanning, and you saw exactly what I did so far in this Camera RAW. If I wanted to, well, let's just look around here for a minute. So let me grab the hand tool. The hand tool is always safe. Now down here is what I'm viewing this at. So right now it's about 8%, which is pretty small. So if I move this, let's be fair, move this to 100%. And now if we look around, my concern at the time was the shadow area underneath this resurrection fern, and also the tree trunk. So if we kind of come this way, let's see what we got here. Yep, so there's all kinds of detail on the lichen, the bark of the tree. I'm pretty happy with that. Now you got to remember, with this particular developer, we lose a stop. So let me go ahead and just put this back to fit in view here for a minute. So we lose a stop. So this was FP4 Plus, and I followed what the card was on the box for Perceptol, and they were rating FP4 Plus at either 125 or 50. So I went ahead and metered this for 50, and I believe we went for, the first one was 3 seconds, and then the last one ended up being a little bit longer, about 4 seconds. But overall, this isn't too bad. Now, as far as sharpness, again, if we go back to 100%, and let's just take a look. And if I took my time and got the camera and everything set up properly, shouldn't be too bad. I actually focused on this area right in here with the tree. I thought that was kind of interesting. So hopefully everything in that plane. Now we did shoot at f/45, so I'm hoping to get enough depth of field from front to back to get everything. So if we kind of look around, you can see way in the back there, obviously that's very, very far away. These pine trees obviously did not come in. But that's all right. So you can kind of see everything overall looks pretty darn good. And so the highlights, that was kind of the big burning question I think everybody had as far as the comments that they left me, is what happened to the highlights? You know, did I blow the highlights? So let me just go ahead and get over here. Now, believe it or not, there is tone in here. As you can see, these numbers, right as I'm showing them to you, are going to be dot, dash, dash, dash. But as I roll over, 255 is absolute bright white. So it looks like I'm at 246. So there's actually tone there, and there's 240, so that's even lower. So this must have been like the edge of the cloud right in here, and then here's some blue sky. And of course, I could always take my highlights and bring those down a scotch if I wanted to. Now this is also the negative that I'm not so excited about. That I probably went too far. Keep in mind also, this was the very first negative, and I developed it to, so the way it worked out is, I believe on the box they said for Ilford FP4 Plus rated at 50, it was supposed to be 13 minutes at 68 degrees or 20 degrees Celsius. So I made sure that my developer was, in my case, 68 degrees. So the other thing is, in their literature, they will tell you if you're using a rotary, constant agitation rotary development system like a Jobo, or I'm using the Chrome drum, you need to reduce 15% right off the top. So I did 20 just to be safe. So I took 13 minutes minus 20%. That came down to 10 minutes, 30 seconds. And that's actually what I developed this one for. So overall, for my first one, having never used this developer with this film, this actually kind of has a little bit of a look like Delta with this particular developer for me. So there's number one. So let's look at number two. So what I did for the second one, because I knew we might be skirting the highlight issue problem, is I pulled my development by, I believe it was 20%. So that brought me down to like 8 minutes and 30 seconds. I believe was what I did the second sheet for. So let's go ahead and look at that one. So I'm going to go ahead and just cancel out of this. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my second sheet, which I just do File, Open in Camera RAW if you're using Elements or Photoshop. And then I'm going to choose my second sheet here, and we'll go ahead and get that one open. All right, now again, we've got to rotate it, so we got it right side up. And now, as you'll notice, the histogram has a certain look to it right now. In fact, there's this black spike over here on the left-hand side. That's because we still have all the edges of the film holder. So if I go ahead and just take my crop tool and draw a box, and we want just to trim off just the black edges. There we go, and you will notice the histogram has now updated, and we've got lots of room here on the highlight area and over here on the shadow area. So again, this is right out of the scanner. I've not done anything to it. So let's go ahead and I will do the Alt or Option and then hold that down. Then I'm going to move my white point over. And you can see that the histogram is actually moving up there at the top, if you can kind of see that. and I'll just kind of bring this over until we get just starts to get some white pixels. And I will do the same thing with my blacks just to make sure we have a pure black. There we go. So it's starting to show up. And then from here, I would basically, look at it and say, do I like my highlights? Do I like my shadows? So maybe I might want to lighten up the shadows a little bit if I wanted to throw a little bit of light into here if I thought it needed it. And of course the highlights, if I wanted to bring those down a little bit. Now last time I got a little bit too crazy with it. So I'm starting to get some detail in here. And again, we're at maybe we might as well say roughly 240 in these areas. So there is tone in there. So yeah, I know a lot of people were kind of like, well, gee, Spence, it might not have worked because you put everything in zone 5. But that's actually what's worked for me in the past. And so what do I think about this particular developer, the Perceptol? I think it's a nice developer, but if you want my honest opinion, because nobody is paying me for these reviews or these videos, there's nobody sponsors me. So I think actually of all the developers I'm going to use, or that I have used, which is I started with the Ilford, I went to D76, I went to PyroCat, and I did that both divided and with when you mix the A and the B together, and now the Perceptol. For me, I think, and I went back and I started looking at some of the older negs, so prepare for this discussion we're going to have today. I actually think I like the D76 the best. It's got fine grain for what I'm looking for. It seems to be one of the sharpest developers that I have ever used, at least from what I'm looking at on the computer. That's what's working for me in my situation. Now, if you have a favorite film and developer combo, I'm not telling you to switch by any means. You need to work with whatever's working with your system. The other thing that I'm going to be looking at that'll be coming up here is I've been talking to a good friend of mine that lives in my community, and he was telling me about the BTZS behind the zone system, and that's where you actually do some film testing and with Fred Newman, and he'll do a step wedge for you and measure it, and then there's an app on your phone. And the nice thing about that is whatever film and developer combination that you choose, Fred will measure that for you, and then with this app and a light meter, it will tell you whether the film can handle that contrast, so it tells you exactly what to shoot it at, and it tells you exactly what to develop it at. So that's kind of my next step. But I think I'm going to do that with Delta 100 and FP4 Plus with D76, because D76 is kind of like one of those developers. It seems like a lot of people kind of use that as like a standard to get started, and then from there you can of course branch out to other things. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking about doing. I've got some changes coming in the equipment, so we'll be doing some videos on those as well. But yeah, anyway, hopefully you guys like the results of what I'm seeing here. I thought it looked pretty good, considering it's high contrast to my first time out with a developer. Maybe what I would do next time is, instead of pulling it by 20%, I might pull it by 30%. That would probably give me a little bit more detail that I'd be looking for in the sky. But overall, I'd be pretty happy with this for myself. But everybody's different. That's what's great about this, is everybody's got their own look that they're going for. Some people like really, really black shadows and really, really white highlights. And if that's what you're into, that's great. Go for it. Me, I'm more of I like to start out with a flat negative, where I have detail in the deep shadows and then also in the brightest highlights. And then I go back in and I will add like an S-curve and put my contrast in later. So again, everybody's kind of got their own way of doing things, and that's what makes this a lot of fun. So anyway, so this is the end of our experiment. So it should be interesting. So give Perceptol a try. You might like it for your work. Again, very, very fine-grained developer. So as always, if you like this video, if you want to give it a like, that'd be great. If you have any comments, please comment down below, and maybe you consider subscribing. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. We'll see you next time.